Yeah, they think of it as it's a contender for the missing link.
Oh, okay. So Lucy?
No, Lucy
was an
not.
Australopithecine.
Yeah.
So she was like one of the earlier non-Homo at all.
Okay. She's definitely Australopithecines are definitely hominins. They're definitely on our branch from chimps.
Yeah. So
this one probably, but not definitely, because the two things that they say make it it has to be is that the foramen magnum,
right,
which I'm not sold on, and they claim that it has non-honing canines.
So that means they don't self-sharpen.
Yeah.
So like
all these have these gigantic canines,
and when every time they go, it sharpens their teeth.
Yeah, on their premolars and stuff.
It's these.
Okay.
And they claim this doesn't have that.
Okay.
But that's what we have of it. So I'm like, maybe.
It's possible.
It's maybe.
Yeah,
but
that looks a lot like our teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah, but of course the skull is crushed.
Yeah.
And
we don't have a bottom jaw.
Oh.
Yeah.
There you go.
So maybe.
And we can't get the DNA because it degrades so quickly.
So quickly. We can get DNA from stuff that's almost a million years old.
Right,
that's
not
7.
The 7's
I wouldn't say that's quick.
What's going on, you guys? My name is Isaac. I'm an anthropologist and a researcher, and today we are going to be sitting down with Dr. Leland Rogers from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. Dr. Leland Rogers is a bioanthropologist and a geneticist, and he currently is the director of the Dr. Leland Rogers Ancient DNA Lab over at UNCW. Dr. Rogers was a professor of mine in college. He and I struck up a really close friendship, and he has been gracious enough to not only sit down with me for an interview to discuss the findings at his new lab involving ancient dog DNA and stuff very close to home to him, Mongolian DNA. He's just also been gracious enough to share his space with us and to show us some of the cool ancient hominin skulls that he has in his laboratory. And I'm just so excited for you guys to get introduced to Dr. Leland Rogers. He's one of my favorite people. He's so funny. He's got a great wit about him. He's got a great mindset towards the human past. And I know you guys are going to love him just as much as I do. If you like this type of content and you want to see more of me in your feed, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that way you never miss a single interview or an episode of the Isaac Hubbell podcast. But without further ado, let's jump into our interview with Dr. Leland Rogers. Thanks, guys.
History.
Right.
And linguistics, though I would say linguistics is kind of, it's dissed the least.
Okay.
But it's ignored the most.
Right.
It's like nobody says anything bad about it, really.
Right.
They just don't really talk about it.
So if we could deviate before we get too much into your PhD, can you explain something to me with linguistic like the linguistic tree of things?
Okay.
How can we actually, without written records, trace back ancient languages? Like, like the whole Indo-European thing and all that. How are we able to re-branch those out if we don't have like written records from those early Indo-European?
Well, we have some early records.
Okay.
Like Sanskrit.
Right.
Stuff like that. They use that.
Okay.
They use modern languages that we know are related.
Right. Okay.
And then you basically try to figure out how they're related and how whatever an earlier language may have evolved from.
Okay.
Like that source. Things like the P sound.
Mm-hmm.
In Indo-European, at least, P turns into F a lot.
Why?
It just does.
Okay, that's a silly question, right? Because we don't have a written.
But a really famous one is like the word pyre.
Okay.
If you change the P to an F, it's fire. It's the same word.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Then and it has the same meaning. So like depending on. Okay, so then is it? However, are we able to kind of trace it because of if it's very different but has a couple of key connections, does that mean that the language is older, or how much of the language has to be similar to know how close it is to the other language? So like if we're comparing like so if we're comparing, let's say like I'm trying to think of like two Indo-European languages. So like
Right.
Sanskrit's a great example,
Yeah.
correct? So Sanskrit and I don't know, isn't early Greek too
Yeah.
Proto-European?
Okay.
So like, how do we figure out that that Sanskrit all the way over here is connected to ancient like Greek? And
Because they share a lot of words, just like
That's-
fire,
it's
fire.
that
kind of
simple.
thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay,
yeah, they
cool.
share a lot
yeah,
of words.
Yeah.
A
okay,
huge amount. This is what people don't
Right.
get. They're like, well, it shares like 2 words doesn't mean the same. It's like, no,
that
they
matters.
change. No, they share like 90. Like
Yeah.
if you look at it, they share like 90% of their vocabulary.
It's
Their
insane.
synonyms is just,
Yeah,
they have certain letters that have fallen off.
right.
But when you lose letters, it's usually consistent.
Okay.
So
Okay.
like when I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure the PY was before FI for fire.
Oh,
So
oh.
in cases where you have a word that is an FI,
right.
doesn't need to be fire, but anything that in English that we have is an FI,
Right.
you could go, okay, well, let's make it a PY and look
Wow.
in like Greek or French or
Yeah.
whatever that it came from
Okay.
and see if it means the same thing.
And it does.
And it does.
Wow, that's so cool. Okay, so you really don't need to have something written down necessarily to actually understand where that one language come from.
To a certain extent.
Right.
You can't be 100%.
In any of it.
Right. And I
Right.
mean, there's lots of issues. One thing is that languages do not evolve at the same speed, so
Right.
they change.
Well, they're
language
also-
changes at different speeds,
Right.
and there are a lot of languages that have disappeared.
Yeah.
So what
And if
happens
they're not
is,
written down.
yeah, when people go, oh, I've recreated the what's it, Proto-Indo-European language, I go, that's very nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's kind of like
Because-
how, would you say it's kind of like how with like Akkadian, for instance, we don't know if that's exactly how it sounded,
Right.
but we're able to phonetically put it together and come up with the sound
Right.
in
Right,
order to.
it's
Okay,
going to sound
okay.
something like this.
Yeah, but it may not be exactly.
right.
Okay.
Like one of my things that I'm always amused with
Yeah.
is that linguists who are reconstructing ancient languages,
Yeah.
they have this thing where they really come up with very odd sounds
Okay.
for
Yeah.
certain, like,
Yeah.
this had to have been some sound like this because it
Yeah.
turned into this and this, and that's the only way
Yeah.
it could blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't think so, because language, humans have a tendency of
Yeah.
going towards what's easier to
Right.
use.
Right.
So when you think of something like a V versus a W,
Mhm.
that's arbitrary,
Right.
because and making the V noise with the W noise is not that hard. But when you have sounds like the ich
hmm
in
Or the
Mongolian,
Or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
the ich is it's a lateral fricative. It's like, that's how they say L in Half Mongol.
Like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
They also do that in, I think, like Sardinian or Corsican or something
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
And it's Celtic as well. Like,
Whoa.
like Lloyd was
Yeah.
Lloyd.
Whoa.
And
Clo-
like Llewellyn was Llewellyn.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know, it's the same
Whoa. Yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now is that comparable to that double L? Like that double L sound is what we're doing right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
In
wow.
in Celtic.
In Celtic. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
In Half Mongol, it's always that.
Oh. Wow.
Only in Half Mongol though. In all the other Mongols,
Yeah.
Mongol languages, they just use the L sound.
So they just
Yeah.
like that. Okay. Okay.
So
Wow.
Bayer La would
Okay.
be Inner Mongolian. Bayer Sha is I don't know.
So adding that
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
It gives that effect, but it's that subtle difference though that shows how the language is
Yeah.
shifting. Or
Right, but the fact is that L is hard to that sound
Yeah.
is hard to make,
right.
and so it's in a sense natural for those sounds that are hard to make to disappear over time. They come back when you basically have
Yeah.
new languages, new words, and like you need to identify new things,
Right.
and so you have to bring
Yeah.
recreate new sounds sometimes. So
Okay.
it comes back sometimes. But the fact is that language tends not to use the really weird, hard sounds like consonant clusters,
Right.
like knick,
Connect.
yeah,
Right.
for night.
Right. Right.
Like the consonant clusters have a tendency of always disappearing. And the fact is that
So is that why we have silent letter? Is that what you're?
that's
kind
in
of-
English, yeah.
In English, is that why though that there's like
Yeah.
silent letters? Is just because they got lazy and couldn't figure out how to like, or didn't want to have to
Yeah.
say, "Wow,
Now,
that's so funny."
yeah, Tibetan does that.
Yeah.
If you go and talk to Tibetans in Lhasa,
Okay.
they use a lot of the old language.
Okay.
If you go to Amdo, which is Qinghai, northern area,
Okay.
they've dropped them all. So all these consonant clusters.
Wow. Now is that because of isolated population groups? Is that why we start to see such a dramatic change? Like, because like there's local stuff. So yeah, there's there's the general Celtic language, for example. But then
Yeah.
like you have little pockets where people sound totally different from one another, but they're almost using the same words.
Oh yeah, well they are using the same words, they're just pronouncing them a little different.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean if it's Celtic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
it's the same words, they're just
Okay.
pronouncing.
Now, can that just be applied to anywhere else, like with any other language too?
I mean, to some degree, if it's in the same language family, then
Okay.
it's more often than not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does all of this then get us to anthropology with a focus in Mongolian? Because you were saying
Well,
that
Mongolia was the focus to begin with.
was the focus to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, how I got into biological
Yeah.
anthropology,
Yeah.
that is, I decided to go with anthropology
Right.
instead of history, and I took some archaeology courses. I first thought I was going to go into archaeology,
Okay.
and I actually like when I talk to most students who are interested in anthropology, I
Yeah.
basically tell them, yeah, unless you want to do forensics,
Yeah.
biological anthropology is only for doctorates.
Oh wow. Yeah, I remember you telling me about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, there's nothing else you can really do with it.
Right.
So, unless you will go public health or
Okay.
forensics,
Okay.
there's no other real unless
Right.
you're a professor,
Right.
kind of like a
Right.
doctor level.
Right.
So I was kind of like, all right, well, I don't know. I wasn't sure how, what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I first started thinking about going into archaeology, but I didn't get along with the archaeologists
Oh.
very well in Indiana
Okay.
because they were much, how do you say, they came from this post-processual school,
Mm-hmm.
and at IUB,
Mm-hmm.
a very large chunk of the department were kind of, I probably still are, rather zealous
Really?
about
Yeah.
post-processualism.
Okay.
And I'm myself coming from basically all these other backgrounds, my immediate response to any zealousy
Right.
is you're stupid.
Right, because that's against the field in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
No,
like
the point is-
anti-anthropology.
Well, it's anti-academia, it's
Yeah.
anti-education. And it really bugged me, because they would be
Right.
like, hey, you have to think about it this way. And I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
no, I have to take that way of thinking into consideration.
Right.
But to say that you are right and I am wrong is incorrect.
Because that isn't true.
Right. We don't know whether
Right.
it's true or not, but the fact is that,
Right.
you're saying that all humans only think and have only thought in one manner.
Which is ridiculous. Like that's
Over
that's
time.
totally ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'm definitely neurodivergent
Yeah.
to some degree. I'm not
Yeah.
hardcore Asperger's, but I'm
Right.
definitely on the spectrum somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you're saying that your neurodivergency is
Right.
the only one, and it's the only correct one, and that everyone else is wrong,
Right.
and that's just not right.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, maybe some people do think about space in the way that a Potterai thinks about space,
Right.
but the vast majority of people don't think about space at all.
Yeah.
And they just kind of react to stuff.
Right.
You know?
Stimuli. That hits them. Yeah. And how do I respond?
Yeah. And I mean, a Potterai is trying to explain it in some way. He's, you know, but the fact is that is his way of explaining this stuff the only way? No. Should anthropologists read him? Definitely.
Yeah.
Should they take in his thoughts into consideration? Definitely.
Right.
But to say, oh, it has to be this way because a Potterai came up with that idea and that's right. I'm like, no.
Right.
You don't. That's not correct. That is not good academia. That's not good thinking.
That's not taking a holistic approach to it at all.
Right. So anyway, so that's what the archaeologists at IU were kind of. That's much more of the kind of cultural anthropology realm.
Yeah.
And they were leaning towards that very hard. At least the ones that I ended up meeting first.
Right.
Turns out like half the department were okay.
Okay.
But I didn't meet those.
Right. You only got that one bit of exposure with those individuals. Right.
So I went, okay, well, I'll take a biological anthropology course.
Okay.
Just to see what it was like. And I took one in I took paleoanthropology.
Okay.
Under Kevin Hunt, Dr. Hunt, who's very important in primatology. He's a primatologist predominantly, does studies in with chimpanzees.
Okay.
And studies like bipedalism, evolution
Yeah.
bipedalism.
Is he the guy? I remember from class once. Is he in the same camp of people that are saying that we got our, was it brachiation? Am I saying that right? From being in trees and having to move along the branches rather than like our uprightness came from being in trees, and it wasn't just the grassland approach.
He's definitely not the grassland approach.
Okay,
He's
okay,
a mix,
okay.
He's the mosaic approach, which is like
Okay.
everybody's starting to realize that that's correct. But he was one of the earlier ones that came up with it. He published some of the first articles.
Yeah, well, because a lot of people have been indoctrinated, Dr. Rogers, with this idea of like, we had to see over the savannah. And it's like, I don't think people are as familiar that there's a lot more data out right now. Like, proving way against that.
Yeah, I would say that's about 30-year-old.
Yeah.
30-year-old ideas from around 30 years ago. People started saying that doesn't really make sense.
Right.
I would say by 2005, that's when I think Professor Hunt started putting out his stuff.
Right.
That's when people started really going, that Savannah Hypothesis doesn't really seem right. These other ideas seem to fit better.
Right.
And then I would say probably about 10 years ago, the vast majority of anthropologists just have kind of accepted, this Savannah Hypothesis just doesn't work because we literally weren't on the Savannah.
But
the thing is, again, you have to remember that, like, there's, again, 10 years ago, I would say the vast majority of people have stopped preaching that.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back 20 more years, though,
it was a pretty valid idea.
Yeah, it was worth considering. Now it's like, the only problem we have is that the vast majority of the early hominins that we have were not in grasslands and were already completely bipedal.
Right, and chimps aren't in grasslands.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so, and we know that they walk bipedally, not all the time, but I mean, they may waddle a little bit, but,
Well, that's Hunt's study.
Okay,
that's like what he does.
Right.
So he actually, like, his chimps, the chimps at his place live in basically the scrubby, like, half-wooded area.
Yeah.
They basically live in the same environment that the early
hominins did. Okay.
And if you look at their skeletal structure,
Mhm.
they look, I mean, they still look like chimps,
Right.
but they look more like early Australopithecines
Yeah. Wow.
than the other chimps.
Wow. That's so crazy.
They have, I mean, our bone structure
Yeah.
is plastic. It
Right.
changes depending on how we use it.
Well, and that's what we were talking about with the skulls. I mean, you can even
Yeah.
see it right there. You know,
Yeah,
like
I
here,
mean,
we want to
this
open it up.
one-
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
I
a
mean,
great
this-
example.
This cranial modification is kind of like shows you this, that
Yeah.
we can do things.
So just for the viewers watching, we'll let you guys know. So these are both human skulls. They're both Homo sapien skulls. But if
Yeah.
you look, this one's been bound. Correct
Yeah.
me if I'm wrong. So
Yeah.
now, what cultures typically did something like this, and do we know why?
There's still a few that do, but this one they're saying wrapping oldest. Did this say they dates back to 9,000 years
Jeez,
ago?
Louise.
I don't know if I buy that.
I don't know about that. Wait, that says BC 200, or is that just
No,
a
this is
serial
2,000.
number? Okay,
This
okay,
is 2,000 years.
okay. I was about to say. Yeah.
Yeah, this is 2,000 old. That's about right.
Okay.
This is probably, it doesn't, it says it's Peru. I would assume this is one of the Nazca
Yeah.
skulls, because Nazca was famous for these.
Right.
They for some reason liked a lot of Central American and South American,
Right.
Southwest South American, like Western.
Yeah,
South
towards the
American,
Andes. Right.
really got into the whole cranial modification. You know, the flathead
Yeah.
Indians in North America, Western North America, did cranial modification.
Right.
A little bit different than this one.
Yeah.
This is very classic.
Yeah,
Nazca.
that's what we kind of see
Yeah.
on a
That's
regular
Nazca.
basis.
The Shunu did it. The Huns did it.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Though. There was a lot of cultures though
Yeah.
that did that. So, do we know why?
No.
Like, so we really? Okay. Now, question also, because there's the rumor: did the pharaohs do that as well in Egypt? Because
There's a discussion about that. There were some pharaohs that were doing that. They believe that they were doing it because they were trying to make their heads shape more like a particular pharaoh who had a congenital defect that made his skull that way. And they
But
thought
because
that
Pharaoh's
was
God.
Yeah,
Right.
they thought that was like a
Wow.
sign of godliness. So they
Wow.
wanted to mold their skulls
Yeah.
to look more like that. That's one of the leading hypotheses. Is probably correct.
Okay.
So yeah, they
But,
definitely do.
okay. So we step out of archaeology though, and we're moving more towards the bio side of it. So
Okay.
you took that bio class.
So I took the bio class,
Yeah.
right? And the project for the bio class was a real challenge for me
Right.
because I was like, okay, I want to do something Mongolia.
Right.
Anything
Right.
Mongolia. What can I do with biological anthropology in Mongolia? The teacher, Professor Hunt, was like, anything, as long as
Okay.
it's biological anthropology, it's
Mm,
cool. You can do
right.
that as your final project.
Wow.
And so I was like, well, what can I do that has anything to do with Mongolia that's biological anthropology? And there's no like ancient hominid bones up
Right.
there.
Right.
So
Well, that we know. But
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
well, they found a couple, but they're, I mean, we really don't
Yeah.
have enough data
Yeah.
to do anything.
right.
And so I was like, just looking around, and I realized, wait a minute, I could look at DNA, look at their DNA proportions and
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so I started gathering all my data, which I still have, the data from from that period, to do I did a big presentation on basically population genetics and how language tends to move with certain types of genetics, but I mean it's not a clear cut.
Yeah.
There are a lot of, this was back in like 2007, 2008,
Right.
and there are professors who'd be like, well, your genetics don't determine what language you speak. I'm like, no, but they're correlated.
Right.
And one of the main correlations that was of note in Central Eurasia, and this was also something that we have seen happen among the Bantu languages in Africa, and that is language tends to travel with the Y chromosomes.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when a Y chromosome takes over a region, usually that region takes the language of that Y chromosome.
Okay, I'm about to ask the question.
Mhm.
So, the Yamnaya,
Yeah.
that whole scenario, that whole bottleneck that occurred,
Okay.
if it's a bottleneck,
Yeah.
okay, so is that why Indo-European languages spread so dramatically, like 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, throughout Europe?
From the Yamnaya?
Yeah, from
Oh,
like Yamnaya group, all those Indo-European
Oh, yeah.
steppe. Wow.
Oh yeah. I mean, if anyone,
Because the Y chromosome thing. So
Yeah.
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 Wow, that's
I mean, that
wild.
was a big part of it.
Okay. Okay.
But the Yamnaya was part of it. It spread with cattle
Right.
and pastoralism. The
Right.
cattle pastoralism is like the most important thing. The Indo-European languages that went into like India and those places, they came from a group that it's probably not directly from Yamnaya,
Okay.
but it's something that when the Yamnaya spread, it wasn't really just their Y chromosomes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was the groups that came after it where really the Y chromosomes were really
Is that like the
notable.
is corded wear culture? Is that post or pre Yamnaya or at the same time?
It's, I think, pretty similar. I think it's around the same time.
Okay. Okay.
But the point was the Yamnaya, they had groups move, but they didn't. They basically moved as little. It seems like when the Yamnaya moved, they moved as like family units or maybe
Okay.
extended family units.
What, like only like 50 people, maybe? What's the population size looking like?
I don't know. I mean, I would say for humans, I don't know, maybe 150, 250.
Okay, so enough to not
People.
cause genetic inbreeding to start occurring.
Right.
Enough.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
So, and they would move. It seems like they moved as groups into a whole bunch of different areas.
Okay.
It seems like they brought their language with them. I'm not sure how much they forced others to speak that language.
Yeah.
I think that it was just the fact that cattle pastoralism was so successful
Right.
that they just did very well.
Right.
And they took over a lot of areas that no one else could actually live in before.
They were steppe, right?
Yeah.
They were all in that steppe. Now,
Yeah.
with that though, where do they actually come from? Because the steppe we say is like a region, but it's like that's like from what is it, Eastern Russia all the way over to China, isn't it?
From Hungary over
okay.
to the Manchuria.
Yeah.
Yeah. They came from the Pontic steppe,
Okay, so
So-
right about in the middle.
like Ukraine,
Okay. Wow.
basically.
Holy cow. Okay,
Yeah,
so
right,
they spread
yeah.
that far all the way
Oh, yeah.
over to like India. Wow.
Well, the Yamnaya itself spread differently.
And I know they're only one of many groups that were in the
Yeah,
steppe at that
well-
time.
Well, maybe not.
Really?
Yeah, the thing is that we don't really have that much like evidence of humans living on the steppe before the Yamnaya.
Really? Oh wow. Was it
There-
just too harsh because of like
There's
the
just
climate?
There's
Or
not much water.
I didn't read about that.
Yeah, and without cattle pastoralism, it's just kind of hard to have, regular food, and you have to be
Okay.
very mobile.
Okay.
And it's very hard to be very mobile with sheep
Yeah.
because while the sheep can be mobile, your housing is.
Oh wow.
And cattle, the Yamnaya
Yeah.
had their cattle as pack animals,
Yeah.
and so they can move their houses, and that was the whole point. Is they
The
were
wagon.
the first mobile pastoralists.
Oh,
like
wow.
Nomadic, quote
Right,
unquote. But
right.
they were the first mobile pastoralists because you
Wow.
literally could move your house with you,
Right. And everything. Yeah.
and
wow.
that's how they got across the steppe.
Okay.
and like inhabited the steppe.
But
So
they
the
weren't
steppe-
using horses though, right? Because
Not yet.
domesticated horses didn't happen until
No,
like,
a couple
Yeah.
thousand years
okay,
later.
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's more recent.
But the people who domesticated the horse had a lot of Yamnaya ancestry.
Oh, that's right. Because
But
it's
not
right up by the
completely.
Black Sea, correct me if I'm wrong? Or is
Pontic
it
steppe
that
again.
whole area?
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
so we don't have a
basically
definitive.
horses were domesticated the same place cattle was domesticated.
Right.
Well, yeah, basically, and the same place the Yamnaya were created nomadic pastoralism or mobile
Right.
pastoralism.
Right.
That's where horses were also, modern horses that we know today were domesticated. There's actually domestication of a horse is very complicated, and there were attempts of domestication everywhere.
Right.
But
Right.
the ones that we actually have now all come from the Pontic steppe.
Wow.
They eventually, very early on, actually, they get attached to these people on the southern Urals, the
Okay.
eastern side of the southern Urals, called the Sintashta. The Sintashta culture is very Bronze Age, and basically they create the first war chariots.
That's right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Were they the 5-spoke chariot? What is it?
no, they'd won that.
Okay.
They had full,
Okay,
full
okay.
spoked
Yeah.
chariots,
Okay.
real,
Okay. Yeah.
real chariots.
Right,
The first ones
right.
that built decent
Yeah.
chariots.
Right.
And they were the crazy militant type.
That's what I was wondering about
That-
because I had read in a paper that there was extreme violence from these pastoral.
from the Yamnaya, not so much, but from the time of the Sintashta, clearly there was a lot of warfare going on.
Okay.
And the Sintashta chariot holotype, like that
Yeah.
type, is the chariot that we
Right.
find
That we across the board.
everywhere.
Right. And it
It's
spreads.
exactly the same, and they spread within a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
And then everybody has it. Egypt's got it. Mesopotamia's got it. Europe's got it. Wow.
The interesting thing is in China, and this is probably true and also in Egypt initially,
Mhm.
but in China, the charioteers, the chariot drivers,
Mhm.
were all like Europeans, were Westerners. Western
Really?
facially. I mean, they
Yeah,
weren't.
yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah.
living
Right.
probably in
Of course.
Kazakhstan,
Of
but
course. Of course.
but they
But
were
have that
they were
Indo-European.
yeah, they were Europoid.
Wow.
So
Wow.
when you dig up the dead
Yeah.
the dead chariot drivers from the Shang
Right.
tombs,
Right.
they have European faces.
That's crazy. So a guy like me would be
Would
that
be
looks like me.
yeah, to
Wow.
the horses.
So this whole
Horses.
idea then that the old world is all disconnected is total nonsense then, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that? Like people maybe not direct connection from Britain to China, but like
Well, how far back do you want to go?
right.
I mean, if you want to go back, say, 8,000 years, there's a lot of disconnect.
Yeah.
By 5,000 years, not much.
We're
It's
really
all
connected. Like
well, everyone knows that there's people way out over that
Right,
way. Every
right.
once in a while there'll be trade.
Right.
Trade was probably done in shorter
bursts.
okay. Sections. Like they
Yeah.
would do trade from here to here, and then
Right.
these people
Then
would
they
trade
would
here
go
to
to
here.
there.
That's
Right.
probably what it started with.
Wow.
But by the Shonyu at least, we know that the Silk Road was already established,
Okay.
2,000 years
Yeah.
ago.
Very
But
old.
probably predates that 2,500 years ago. We have some of that going on. But Shungnu period, I mean, it's like the Shungnu are in Mongolia,
Right.
and this will lead into my
Yeah.
study.
There we go.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Shungnu
This is
are
a
in
great
Mongolia,
transition then. Okay. So
and
and it should
from 2000
how do we say it? Do you mind?
well,
Shunnu.
Shungnu is the way that it's pronounced currently.
Okay.
It was probably like Hongai,
Hungai or something
Yeah.
like that. Okay. Okay.
or something like that.
Yeah.
We don't really know.
Yeah.
2,000
Yeah.
2,000 years, 200 years ago. But the Shungnu have from Mongolia, just north of China, their burials have Roman grave goods.
Wow.
Asian, East, Chinese,
Yeah.
obviously, but
Yeah.
Roman grave goods all the time. Like,
So
it's
we
not
know
a big
there's
surprise.
trade occurring
From Rome.
there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Holy
there's Roman
cow.
glass. They
Yeah.
find like glass goblets that
Yeah.
are literally like you can look at the glass and analyze the glass like this was technically made at that foundry in Rome.
Wow. Wow. So we can
2,500 years ago.
sample things like that far back, like and connect it to a localized area.
Oh,
That,
yeah,
wow.
certain things, yeah.
That's so crazy.
Glass is one of the better ones because it's
Right.
like you get it from mixing
Right.
specific minerals and silicon and the different rocks and
Wow.
stuff. And from
Yeah.
way back then, it's like
That's so
everyone has its signature. It's like obsidian. You could always
Right.
know which
Where you're getting it from.
yeah
Because of the
volcano-
deposits.
right.
Holy cow.
So they know that this glass was made in Rome.
Right.
And then there's a lot of a lot of beads, glass
Mhm.
beads came from Rome. We have some really fancy stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, tons of stuff from India, tons and tons of stuff from India. It's not that far though.
Now, do we see the reverse happen, or was it always that?
Well, Mongolia really was never really much of a producer, except for animals.
Okay.
So, like they grew a lot of horses,
Okay.
and their horses went all over the place.
Right.
This is
right.
like one of the problems with looking at modern horses, looking at modern horse DNA, and trying to understand, where horses came from.
Right.
Is that if you're looking at modern horse DNA, all you see is that that all the horses are related. They're all mixed up.
Okay.
And you have no idea what's going on. We needed that ancient
We need to
samples
get it
from
out of the
different
ground.
places.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Which we've done. Which
Yes.
we've done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So very cool
Yeah.
group run by this one guy named Ludovic Orlando in France. He's the ancient horse dude.
Okay. He's the guy you want.
Yeah.
You want to know about ancient
Yeah,
horses.
he's like
Yeah.
his name isn't the first on all of all the papers.
Yeah.
But he does most of the writing
Mm-hmm.
because like his grad students who are putting out the papers, he rewrites them for them. But he just puts his name in the end. I know this because I
It's
talked to
sweet.
him
No,
about
it's
it.
kind. I mean,
that's
he
great.
wants to make
Yeah.
sure that they get. That's
Yeah.
very kind of. But he also wants to make sure it sounds
Yeah.
the way it should sound.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that like they don't say things that are not provable. He even says some stuff that I'm like, okay, that's
Yeah.
stretching a little bit.
Oh,
But he's really good.
Yeah.
The data that they have is really good. I have a couple minor issues with how they do their studies because they're doing using chips, basically like 23andMe and stuff. They created a chip, which basically makes all the testing really cheap.
Right.
So they can do massive amounts of samples and get huge amounts of data. But as chips, you're only looking for stuff that you already know about.
Right.
So they did the study to find what they were looking for.
Okay.
And then after that, they did a study that with these chips.
Mhm.
The problem with the chips is that all the DNA that you get only tells you what it's only on that chip.
Right.
Like what they've asked for. You can't dig.
Right. There's
through
no
the data.
expanding
Yeah,
outside of that.
the same way.
Okay. Right.
Which I mean, again, it's not a big deal.
No, but it gets us to a next step, but it's not the end all be all. That's not the
Right.
end all
It's just like
answer.
I just wish that he has hundreds of these ancient horse genomes, but he doesn't have the genomes. He has snip chips of them.
Right.
And if you actually had all their genome and DNA, we could just sit there and mine that stuff forever.
Right.
But we don't have that.
Right.
So,
Well, AI could probably help with stuff like that too.
no.
If we had all the data.
Well, the point is,
Right. But we
using
gotta
snip
get
chips,
we gotta get the
with the
actual
snip
data.
chips, you don't get the data.
Right.
You only have you have a couple, if you look at one section of DNA, it'll look for one mutation, and if it has that mutation, it lights up.
Okay.
So it has that mutation. It's this.
Right.
But it doesn't actually tell you
The whole
Yeah.
picture.
And
It's
if you're
not
not
the whole
look-
thing.
And if you're not looking for that mutation, there's another mutation 3 points away.
That's right, and you're missing it completely because you're not even looking for
Right.
it, and you're not even thinking about the ramifications of
Right.
the effects of that
Right.
slight mutation on the gene is.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's
I
like
never
if you
thought
are,
about it like that.
Yeah. So I mean, again, I'm not dissing him.
No,
but
not
I'm
at
just
all.
saying. I'm just saying that oh man, if we actually could pull the full,
Right.
and that's one of the reasons why I'm really trying to just do full genome.
So,
trying to
let's
avoid
kind of get
genes.
into that. So, what is the Dr. Leland Rogers Ancient DNA Lab here at UNCW? So, what are
Okay.
you doing with?
Well, it's very new.
Right.
It's
Yes.
extremely brand new.
Yes.
I'm very excited, of course. The school has been very generous in setting up the lab. We've had a bunch of facility issues in getting it set up. It took a lot longer than it should have. It cost more than it should have because of mistakes
Yeah.
that
Well.
facilities made. And that bothers me mainly because I was really trying to get it set up as fast and as cheaply as possible so I could show people that you can set these things up for pretty quickly and they're kind of cheap.
Right.
But because of they made a lot of mistakes. It's like, well, it was still not super expensive, but it took a lot longer and than it should have. And, but it's set up now, more or less.
And what are we working on in the lab right now?
So, due to some annoying bureaucracy, I had to buy a huge number of reagents before my lab was set up.
Okay.
So I didn't know precisely what I had yet
in stock.
And everything because I couldn't move into the lab. So I basically went, okay, well, I don't know what I have. I don't know how much I'm going to be doing, but I have to spend all my money that they gave me. So I'm just going to buy these extra reagents, which is good.
Yeah.
In a sense, I didn't waste it. So I have like the startup for a huge amount of samples.
Okay.
I could do massive amounts of samples halfway right now.
But we can't go all the way. Right. Okay. Okay.
Just so you know where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of projects that are in the works.
Right.
Because I can start them all.
But we can't finish.
Right. I can't finish yet. So that's going to be basically once I get to that point where I have all these things ready to go, I'll be able to just, I'll apply for the grant and say, I need exactly this much to run it through the sequencer. Right. Because I have it up until that point. I have enough reagents basically do all the extractions for thousands of samples.
Right.
And I have library kits for hundreds of samples.
Wow.
I don't have that many in hand at the moment.
Right.
But I have a lot. I have for being, a tiny little department, for anthropology. I have, let's see.
Tease us some. Give us some details if you can. So what are we working on?
I have, probably the first. I'm not sure. The first extractions will probably be, what are they? 1,200-year-old to 1,800-year-old Costa Rican canids that are probably dogs. They were buried. They look like they were. We don't have really good site reports. One we have an actual photograph of what it looked like when it was buried. Okay. And it was fully articulated, which means it was buried as a whole animal, not eaten.
So it was done on purpose.
Yeah.
Okay.
Buried.
Okay.
And the other ones seem like they're like that as well, but we don't have we don't have a nice picture to say that's true. So they look like they're all buried as they're fully articulated. They're buried as pets as opposed to food. They're all small.
Okay.
I don't know how small.
Do we know what species they're?
Not yet.
Or not? It wouldn't be species. Right. Breed.
Breed. Well, we don't really know the species. Mm-hmm. Most likely, 95%, they're domesticated
They're
dogs.
just domesticated regular dogs.
Yeah, I mean they could be young coyotes or maybe foxes or
Okay.
something.
Okay.
But
Okay.
unlikely.
Right.
But I mean, we'll
But
find
we're
out.
kind of we're pretty sure then that they were domesticated though.
Well, if they're dogs,
If
they
they're
were
dogs.
definitely domesticated.
Okay. Okay.
They were buried as pets, but
Right.
humans make lots of weird pets. So.
Right. Cats are domesticated, and
Yeah.
we have them all over our houses. Right.
Yeah, no, so we're not really, I mean, the chances of it not being a domesticated dog is very small.
Okay. 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 Okay.
So, but you know, when I do get the data back and do a comparison, and I'll throw in like, you know, a coyote and a fox and a wolf to compare it to, just to
Okay.
make sure it's not.
Right.
But I mean,
Right.
the chances of them turning up to be one of those is very small. It was
Right.
going to be a dog. So, what kind of dog? What kind of
Yeah.
dog breed? We have no idea, of course, because of the fact that dog breeds, the idea of a dog breed is only a couple hundred years old.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Now,
we didn't really have breeds
right.
over
But phenotypically, like the expression, right, is so different. But all dogs are.
Well, again,
You get kind of what I'm asking. You know?
yeah. The expression, the phenotypic expression of what we see as dogs today did not exist 200 years ago. Yeah, we have done some massively weird stuff. Oh, I just put it away. I had a bulldog
Okay.
skull.
Yeah, with the
But-
push-up snout, right?
Yeah, their jaw is like sticks out here.
Yeah.
But basically, we have done huge changes to the dogs, specifically over the past couple hundred years, since the idea of
It's that
breeding-
recent? Really?
Well, most of it, but not all of it.
Okay.
The point, though, is that there are very few fixed ideas of what a breed is supposed to be
Okay.
until very recently.
Yeah.
There are a couple that existed. One of the oldest, what you would consider a breed, like an actual breed, was the Pekingese.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because they actually had, they were very specialized. They were bred to look what they looked like about 2,500 years ago. And from around 2,000 years ago up until very recently, they have basically been following a description that dates back to like 2,000 years of this is
Whoa.
what this dog is supposed to look like.
Where do we know where that happened, where that change in
Beijing.
so all the way so we're pretty sure it's all the way back.
Oh, 100%.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's no
That's
question. about that.
amazing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was.
Yeah.
That particular dog was bred specifically to be the like imperial lapdogs,
Wow.
and no one else was allowed to have them
Right.
except people who were in the
The
imperial family,
right.
probably extended family.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that is the oldest like breed.
Oh,
quote
what we
unquote,
would call a
breed.
breed of
Yeah.
dog.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
There were lots of dogs that had phenotypic appearances that looked pretty similar to regional differences and things like
Right,
that. And that's why
right.
you have like think of spaniels. You have all the spaniels have a different area they come from, and
Right.
they have a different appearance based on that area. They probably had differences
Okay.
back 300 years ago. Like if you think of like all the different spaniels in the British Isles,
Yeah.
and so forth.
Yeah.
There's like the Cocker Spaniel, the Springer Spaniel, the English
Right.
Spaniel, whatever. There's a whole bunch of them. They probably did have all their specializations, and they did have
Right.
a kind of appearance that was like similar to what they look like now.
Right.
But there wasn't I'm mixing mine. I'm going to breed mine with one of
Oh.
those or something.
Right.
Or like,
Okay.
it's like there wasn't a strict
Yeah.
breeding
Yeah.
regimen. And
It wasn't specifically.
yeah,
We're gonna make this change here and
Right.
there. Okay.
It's like-
Okay.
the English setter, the English spaniel, cocker spaniel,
Right.
you know, and a was it a Springer spaniel?
Mhm.
You could interbreed them,
Right.
and it was fine.
Right.
And you know, they would, if it came out and they looked more like cocker spaniels, you keep it with the cocker spaniels.
Right. Yeah. It's a
Came out-
cocker spaniel.
Yeah.
It's- Okay.
Well,
Okay.
keep it with
Okay.
that one, whatever. That's
Yeah.
fine. They look kind of similar anyway. They have similar roles and whatever.
Right.
It's just,
Right.
you know, and that's what it was like up until a couple hundred years ago in Britain. Britain is where they came
Okay.
up with the idea of the
Right.
breeds.
Right.
Um,
So there's no like, I know this isn't the same thing, but there's no like last common breed of, you know, you could say like, because you, okay. Could you say that?
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
You could say it. You could like people, you know, will say, oh, you can't ever find the biological blah blah blah. I'm like, well, no, actually, we can.
Right.
We understand genetics,
And we know where dogs were probably domesticated too, right? Like,
Well, I mean, we know a lot about the domestication of dogs. It's
Right.
just, I mean, they've been all over the place.
okay,
But
so correct me
they've
if
been
I'm wrong.
domesticated for
Yeah.
started domestication 35,000 years ago.
So why did it take so long for us to domesticate other animals?
Well,
Like we
There's-
domesticated a predator before we domesticated a prey animal. How does that work?
Well, there's a lot of contention about this. I am very much a part of the commensalism school. I believe that dogs. We know for a fact that dogs were selected as pets
Right.
at least 32,000 years ago.
Right. Now where would we
In
say-
Siberia.
In Siberia. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have like the earliest samples from that area, and
Right.
it's an interesting period because you have to remember 35,000 years ago we still had Neanderthals.
Right. We had
They
Denisovans
were
in
in-
that area.
It's actually right next to the Venezuela,
Right. Right.
really close to it. So
Those Denisovans are so wild to think about.
so why is it that anatomically modern Homo sapiens are the only animals that have pets?
Right. Right.
None of the other ones had pets.
That we know of. Right.
Yeah, that leads back to domestication
Right. So okay.
because we're
yeah.
more sociable.
Right.
We as domesticated animals are willing to accept things that are outside of our tight knit groups.
Right. Our little tribe.
Yeah. Our
Right.
little nuclear families or whatever.
Right. Right.
We can accept things from outside of that into our group.
Okay. And
But that's what pets are.
right. Right. But how did we get past that? I guess is what I'm asking. Because conventional wisdom would say like they're dangerous. They're outside the group, whether it's a person, place, or thing. So let's not let it into the group. What about us made us so much more open? Like, because that had to have been evolutionarily like beneficial, right?
It was evolutionarily beneficial to be nice to each other.
Wow. What does that tell us for today when you think about it?
We are going backwards.
Yeah, it's kind of a little scary, right? So I guess that kind of goes into,
Yeah.
so we're working on the Costa Rican dog sample.
Yeah.
What are some other samples that we're working on?
Okay, the other ones are so it's only a couple 100-year-old from Virginia. And there's a site that has during slavery there's a slave population had cattle, and the slaver population had cattle,
Okay.
and the archaeologist who's interested in it
Yeah.
wants to see whether or not their cattle had been intermixed or that they were
Separate.
completely separate.
Okay. Now, what would that tell us about the time? That what kind of information can we gather if we learn that they are the same or that they're different?
Well, I think if they're different, it would be more interesting
Okay.
because that would mean that like they did not allow their slaves to have their cattle
Right.
intermingle,
Right. Right.
which would be really interesting. And there are other things we could look at. We could look at things like, depending on how much data we can get out of these. I'm hoping we can get a decent amount, but if we can get Y chromosomes and mitochondrial DNA, seems pretty likely. They're not very old samples. Then we can tell whether or not, if there's intermixing, whether it's like the males are being allowed to stud the slaves females,
or vice,
or unlikely it's vice versa.
very unlikely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, are they doing that?
Right.
Are they just completely intermixed?
Right.
I mean, how is it
Right.
intermixing? So that's what
gonna
he's
be
kind of
fascinating.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Wow. Good. Well,
All of any study of domesticated animals, really, that we consider domesticated animals. I mean, it depends on
so would that be like
but-
ungulates and stuff like that?
Well,
Or
I mean, the main any animal study that you're doing on a domesticated animal, like dogs, cats, sheep, goats, cows, horses, camels, guinea pigs.
yeah.
Those, like, there's a
Isn't it?
list.
Yeah.
But the fact is, when you're doing that, you're doing a study on humans.
Right. Right.
The only time where zoology is not anthropology is when you're studying, like, a certain fish that's found in a stream that is basically has no contact with humans ever.
Right.
Then you're doing pure zoology.
Okay.
Which is cool. Or like
Yeah.
if you're studying, fish at the bottom of the ocean in this
Yeah.
deep caverns.
Yeah.
that are living off
The
of,
trenches and stuff
Like,
like
yeah,
that.
I mean, those you could be like, okay, that's not really about humans at all.
Yeah, like hydrothermal vents and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
But otherwise,
Okay.
I mean, almost all animals now, because we live in the Anthropocene.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Now, do you subscribe to that? Do you think we are
Oh, yeah.
at what we would consider like the Anthropocene
Oh,
type
yeah.
of? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe the end of our species.
Well, no, that's a different matter. I mean, the fact is that we are the most important force, agent on
Right.
this planet.
Right.
We have been probably for a couple hundred years. I don't know when you want to say that Anthropocene started.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because some people say like Industrial Revolution, and then some
Yeah.
people say it's
Nuclear.
or
yeah,
Some people have heard talk about it even being extended all the way back to like those early Bronze Age. Like when we start really
Oh.
cultivating and manufacturing and industrializingly, like using kilns and things like that to
Yeah.
melt metal and everything, because
Yeah.
that's technically leaving an atmospheric impact,
yeah.
isn't it?
Well, yeah, I would say that industrialization is probably the best kind of line in the sand.
Right.
Right. But I mean, if somebody wants to say it was the nuclear age started with the testing of the first nuclear bomb, I'd be like, well, I can understand that argument.
Okay.
I think it started earlier, but again, like it's like when does Homo erectus become a Homo
Right.
heidelbergensis?
Right.
You know,
If it is even different,
well, no, the point is,
yeah.
that's the point is, at some point, that you're drawing a line in the sand.
Yeah.
You're just doing it as best as you can,
Right.
The
To
difference,
categorize, maybe you would say.
yeah,
Okay.
when people say, "Oh, well, Homo habilis is not Australopithecine because of this, this, and this," and I'm like, so basically, you're saying that about 10% of the 10% of Australopithecines skulls that we have are Homo habilis, and about 20% of the Homo habilis skulls that we have are Australopithecines, and even some of the early, Homo erectus are Australopithecines, based on
Right.
the data that that line that you've drawn in the sand.
Right.
They're like, no, because of that. I'm like, so you're drawing a new line?
Right.
You're drawing a new line now.
Right. And that's
You know,
okay, but
yeah,
at
but the
least
point
admit
is,
it.
yeah, it's just, as long as you exactly.
Yeah.
As long as you admit that, yeah, well, we don't really know. We think this one is maybe this, and think
Right.
that one is maybe that, and we're kind of, we don't have perfect data
Yeah.
on it, that's fine. You know,
Right. Well, it's kind of like, when does an inch become 2 inches? You can always go deeper and
Yeah.
deeper and
Yeah.
deeper, and it'll be okay. I see what you're saying.
So, you know, for the Anthropocene, when does Holocene and Anthropocene begin? It's like, oh, it depends on how you want to define it. If everybody finally decides and chooses, okay, we're going to define it on this day.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't fit everything, that's the one we're going to pick. I would say, okay.
Okay.
All right. I mean, is it perfect? No. But it's something that we could talk about now.
And it
And
gets
we
the
can say-
point across.
Yeah.
And helps people understand the impact that we're having on the planet.
Yeah.
Too.
And the fact that the way that science works is you can always change it later.
Right. Isn't that the point of time? No, that's the whole thing, though. Like, that's the whole. It's always
Yeah.
evolving. It's always shifting.
Yeah.
We're always learning more.
Yeah. If there's enough evidence that comes out that says, okay, really, it should be when we start using electricity.
Oh, then it matters.
And
yeah.
then we could give that a specific time and say, all right, that was more important because of X, Y, and Z than industrialization.
Right.
And thus we're going to start using this time period and everybody's going to use it. And
Yeah.
okay, if that's what you want to say, as long as I know how you're defining your terms and how it fits into those terms.
Right.
And if it fits, it's fine. I can say that. I'll say, okay, well, we now say that the Anthropocene starts at this date,
Right. Right.
which is fine. You know, the point is that it's when humans become the most important, like, molder of the world.
Our change
Yeah.
impact on the world is significantly over half. You would maybe, like
Well, yeah, I mean,
above average.
yeah, we're definitely. I mean, the most important. Basically, we are the most.
Like, a
important.
crow is not changing its environment that much.
Right.
Whereas
Yeah.
we are literally knocking down half a forest to build an entire
Yeah.
plaza or something.
Yeah.
That's a big shift than a crow swooping down and saying, I'm going to take this and this and
Right.
start building my nest. You know?
There's some very interesting ancient studies, not ancient studies on ancient things.
Right.
There is a mammoth step
Mm-hmm.
hypothesis,
Okay.
almost theory, and that is about how the steppe regions,
Mhm.
when mammoths were around, had different ecology that was actually, like, in a sense, probably not very consciously farmed, but basically managed in a sense by the existence of mammoths,
Really?
because they would eat certain things. They would,
I didn't think about it like that.
yeah, they would be able to dig
Right.
water in certain
Right.
areas so that the environment
Yeah.
of the steppe actually
Whoa.
changed based on
That's
mammoths.
wild. And
So
they
those
really
things-
are modifying their environment because
Yeah.
of that. Wow.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah,
Well, it's kind of like how what are
a
those
lot of
trees?
animals have some influence like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
usually you don't see it quite as, pronounced as with things like mammoths, because they're just so big
Yeah.
and they could do so much and they have so little to fear, at least
Right,
until we
right.
got up there.
Right. Well, we took advantage of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if you wouldn't mind me asking, though, could you kind of walk me through the steps of what your lab? We now covered some of the samples, but how does the lab work? What machines are you using? Like,
Oh.
how do we? So, when you take a sample, when
Yeah.
you take a sample, what are you doing with that sample?
Okay. Well, standard process for DNA analysis, ancient DNA analysis, is the first thing you do is you want to extract the DNA from the bones.
Okay.
How you do that is you wash the bones first, try to get off all the loose stuff. Try to clean the outside. I used to use a bleach treatment, but a lot of studies are now suggesting that a soap in this stuff called EDTA, it's basically like a soap. You take the samples to extract the DNA. Basically, you need to powder them.
Okay.
So, at least I've been powdering them, which destroys the sample. So you have to be very careful. and be as conservative as possible, and make sure you use pieces that aren't essential.
Yeah.
I like using ribs
Okay.
because long bones tend to have pretty good preservation, and ribs in general don't inform us much on anything.
Okay.
So if they're destroyed, it's not a huge deal,
Okay. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Teeth has slightly better preservation, but there are things you could do with teeth, like you could do analysis of microwear to try to figure out
Right.
diets and things like that.
Right.
And so, it's something that will be missed,
Right. Right.
The best thing is called the oh my, I just forgot the word. It's the inner ear. Starts with a P and it ends with pyramid. Petrous, the petrous bone. Okay, the petrous bone. Technically, it's not a bone. It's
Right.
it's the temporalis bone.
Okay.
The petrous pyramid of temporalis bone.
Okay.
It has incredibly good DNA preservation,
Okay.
but it's a part of the skull.
Yeah.
So you have to rip a hunk out of the skull and destroy it,
Yeah.
and that's sad. If you can get the DNA
Right.
in a different way, so
Right.
I prefer using things like ribs. If you have teeth that you don't need to worry about, that's always nice.
Right. Okay.
I got a couple petrous bones from these the
Mhm.
Mongolian samples, which I haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
2 petrous bones, and the rest of those are ribs because they came from skulls that have already been fallen apart.
Okay,
So
okay.
so it wasn't like
We're not
removing it.
destroying the sample.
Yeah,
It's
which
already
is-
smashed.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So I got 2 petrous
Yeah.
bones, so that's
Yeah.
nice. But anyway, you powder the bones, and then you soak them in this. Basically, it's like a detergent, it's like a
Okay.
soap. And what that does is, soap basically it takes the protein, the DNA, literally
Okay.
off the bone
Wow.
into the liquid,
Okay.
and then you take that liquid and you bind the DNA that's in that liquid now with specific chemicals
Right.
to what I was talking about. I use a glass milk slurry,
Okay.
and the inside of the test tubes and the filter of the test tube. The glass milk slurry just gives a little bit extra surface area for the DNA to adhere to.
Right.
A lot of people don't bother with the glass milk. I'm
Mhm.
just like, well, it doesn't hurt, so I'll
Yeah.
use it. So you have the DNA has been pulled off the bone. It's now in a solution.
Okay.
You put it in the tube with the glass milk and other
Right.
stuff.
Okay.
Put some other chemicals in it that basically takes the DNA that's in that solution and binds it
To
to
that.
to the glass,
Okay.
basically.
Right.
And the filter, the glass, the tube, and everything.
Okay.
Binds it to that. And then you drain the liquid,
Okay.
and then you wash it with just basic
Yeah.
clean, like actually
Distilled
just like
water.
alcohol.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
You just wash it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you put in another reagent that
Mhm.
basically pulls the DNA off of the glass and the filter,
Wow.
and then you run that through a centrifuge
Right.
and collect it in a little tiny tube, a little tiny drop of it.
And that's the thing
And
that
that's-
spins
that's a
ridiculously
centrifuge, yeah.
fast. Okay. And what is it
Yeah.
doing? Why is that spinning out with?
And it just pulls it through
Okay.
all the stuff off of the filter
Okay. Okay.
into the receptacle. So then you have like a drop
Yeah.
of concentrated DNA from
Wow.
your ancient source, and then you take that and you clean it a little bit, depending on what kind of process you're doing. I'm using it's called Single Strand Next Generation Sequencing
Okay.
library construction. Most places use double strand, and what double strand is that it basically takes the double strand DNA
Right.
and attaches basically barcodes on
Okay.
both sides,
Right.
and then it tries to read the section.
Okay. Okay.
Within
Yeah.
single strand. What it does is it just attaches it to the one end here
Right.
and the one end here, but it doesn't matter because it just reads until that piece.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Single strand gets a lot more data,
Okay.
but it's also tends to be a little messier because
It was messier in what way? Like,
well, it's harder to control
okay.
because it just adheres to some DNA strand and reads it. It doesn't have an end
Oh.
stop. It doesn't have like a
Right.
limit.
Right.
For ancient DNA, that's better.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
So why?
Because for ancient DNA, you want every minuscule drop of data you could possibly
Right. You want all the data
Yeah.
you can get because that's
Yeah.
what the DNA is. It's the data
Right.
of our.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it might be messy, and you
Right.
might have to sift through it. But that's
Right.
what computers are good at.
Right. Okay.
So double strand, basically, it is a little bit cleaner,
Hmm.
but you lose a little bit of the DNA in the ends
Okay.
because it has a limited
Yeah. You got
piece
the.
that you cut off the
Okay.
ends of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you
That's so
basically you lose a little bit of data for a slightly more clearer picture.
Right.
But with today's technology, you don't really need the clear picture. You know, if you really want a clear picture, you have to go back to Sanger sequencing and where you actually
Right.
sequence a very specific section and everything, which I did and it works,
Yeah.
but it's costs a lot and
Right.
it's a lot of work.
Okay.
Um,
So that's how that's how your laboratory is off. That's how the machines and what you're doing in your lab right
yeah,
now. Okay.
basically. Well, I'm also making double stranded for the cattle.
Oh,
DNA that
okay,
I'm doing.
okay,
I'm using
okay.
double stranded because it's cleaner. It's newer samples. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have a massive amount of DNA. It's
Yeah.
not, and it's cheaper to do double strand, so I'm just I'll do double strand with that. The single strand I'm going to use for all the other stuff.
Okay.
So
So let's get into a little bit more of that other stuff.
Okay, and so the
yeah,
last
let's get
set-
into the
the
let's
last set of samples that I'm doing, which I'm the most kind of attached to,
yeah.
come from a site in basically my wife's kind of hometown.
No way.
Ish. My daughter was actually born there too.
Yeah.
It's really close to there, at least about. It's like maybe a 3 to 6 hour drive. 6 hour drive,
Yeah.
except it's not very far. It's just that there are no roads.
Right. That's the part of the dilemma. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a you're going like 20 miles an hour maximum, and just over dirt roads and
Yeah.
sand and stuff, and whatever. Drive across creeks and things. Not very many creeks. Dry creek beds.
Right.
It's Mongolia, very dry. But it's a really neat site. It's hidden away. This site is from the Shang period,
Okay.
which is 2000. I mean, the samples that we've carbon-14 dated